My fiancée thought her one last night of freedom was a secret. She forgot that before I was her groom, I was an Army intelligence specialist. She didn't know I was tracking her location, monitoring her lateral financial movements, and archiving the text messages she sent to her boss while I slept next to her. When I walked into our rehearsal dinner, I didn't bring a toast. I brought a projector, a forensic audit of her affair, and a USB drive addressed to her lover's wife. I watched her entire life collapse in 60 seconds flat without raising my voice. If you discovered your partner was living a double life on your dime, would you just leave, or would you burn their world to the ground? This is Operation Broken Vow. I executed the perfect revenge, and I have the files to prove it. The air in our apartment felt pressurized. It was not the good kind of pressure, like the anticipation of a deployment or the adrenaline of a project launch. It was the heavy, static-filled silence that happens right before a circuit overloads. I stood in the hallway of the home we had built together, watching the woman I was supposed to marry in 48 hours, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. The lighting in the living room seemed too bright, almost clinical, exposing dust motes dancing in the air. She was standing in front of the full-length mirror, applying perfume. It was a floral scent, something heavy with jasmine. Usually that smell signaled intimacy, but tonight, it was applied with such intensity that it felt less like a fragrance and more like camouflage. It was a layer designed to mask something else. "Ryan, you are staring again," she said, catching my reflection in the glass. She turned around, flashing a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Relax. It is just one last night of freedom with the girls." There was that phrase again. One last night of freedom. She had repeated it 3 times in the last hour. To a civilian, it might have sounded like a playful cliché. But my background is not civilian. I spent 6 years in Army Signals Intelligence, SIGINT. My entire existence was defined by listening to noise, filtering out the static, and identifying the signal. I learned that when a subject repeats a specific phrase verbatim, they are often sticking to a rehearsed script to cover a deception. Now, working in corporate cybersecurity, I apply the same logic to data streams. I look for anomalies in the baseline. Tonight, my fiancée was the anomaly. I looked at her dress. It was new, a backless crimson silk number that clung to her frame like a second skin. We share a credit card account for wedding expenses, and I monitor our cash flow religiously. I had not seen a transaction for this dress. That meant she purchased it with cash or on a private card I did not have access to. That was the first red flag, a hidden financial data packet. "You look incredible," I said. My voice was calm. It is always calm. Emotional volatility is a liability in my line of work. "Thanks, babe," she said, grabbing her clutch. "Remember, the girls made a rule. No phones tonight. Total blackout. We want to just be in the moment." I nodded slowly. "No phones. Operational security." She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "You always make it sound so military. It is just a party, Ryan." But it was not just a party. No phones is a tactic. In my world, you go dark when you do not want your location triangulated or your communications intercepted. You go dark when the mission profile violates the rules of engagement. The doorbell rang. Her friends, her bridesmaids, spilled into the apartment in a wave of high-pitched giggles and expensive hairspray. They were the extraction team. I watched them closely. Usually they would hug me, joke about the wedding, or ask if I was nervous. Tonight they were different. They moved around me like water flowing around a rock. They avoided direct eye contact. Their laughter felt performative, too loud for the quiet room. They knew something. In intelligence terms, they were complicit assets. I kissed my fiancée on the forehead. Her skin was cool. She did not lean into the touch. She tolerated it. "Have fun," I said. "Be safe." "I love you," she said. It was automatic. A system pinged to check if the connection was still live. "I know," I replied. I let them leave. I watched the door close, and the silence rushed back in, heavier than before. Trust is a critical vulnerability. You give someone the encryption keys to your life, and you hope they do not sell them to the highest bidder. I had given her everything, but my instincts were screaming that the perimeter had been breached. I did not pace the floor. I did not drink. I went to my office, the second bedroom we had converted into my workspace. I sat down in my errand chair and woke up my rig. 3 4K monitors flickered to life, bathing the dark room in a cool, blue glow. This was my domain. Logic, code, verifiable truths. I had a contract to finish a network penetration test for a mid-sized regional bank. I needed to focus. I put on my noise-canceling headphones, blocking out the silence of the empty apartment, and began typing. I ran scripts, watching lines of green code scroll down the terminal. I was looking for weak points in the bank's firewall, probing their defenses. It was methodical, soothing work. It allowed me to suppress the gnawing suspicion in my gut. Time dilated. The numbers on the digital clock shifted from 10 p.m. to 11:42 p.m. My personal phone, sitting face up on the desk next to my keyboard, vibrated. A single short buzz. I glanced at it. An Instagram notification. A direct message request from a user with no profile picture and a handle that was just a string of random numbers. A burner account. I paused. My hands hovered over the mechanical keyboard. In the cybersecurity world, anonymous messages are usually phishing attempts or threats, but this felt personal. I unlocked the phone. The message contained no text, just a single video attachment. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then, I pressed play. The video was shaky, likely filmed from a discreet angle across a crowded room. The lighting was strobing purple and blue lasers cutting through artificial fog. The bass of the music distorted the audio, but the visual data was crystal clear. It was a nightclub downtown. I recognized the VIP layout. In the center of the frame, sitting on a velvet couch, was the woman in the red dress. My fiancée. She was not dancing with her girlfriends. She was not celebrating her freedom. She was straddling a man in a tailored charcoal suit. His face was partially obscured at first, but then he turned, and the strobe light caught his profile. He was older, distinguished. He had a silver watch that glinted in the light. His hands were not tentative, they were possessive, gripping her waist, sliding down to her hips. And she was kissing him. It was not a quick, drunken mistake. It was deep, passionate, familiar. She had one hand tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, erasing the space between them. The camera panned slightly to the left. Her friends, the bridesmaids who had avoided my eyes, were standing nearby. They were not stopping her. They were cheering. One of them was clapping, raising a shot glass in a toast to the infidelity. The video ended. The screen went black, reflecting my own face. I sat there in the blue glow of my monitors. I waited for the rage. I waited for the urge to scream, to smash the keyboard, to punch the drywall until my knuckles shattered. But the rage did not come. Instead, a terrifying calm descended over me. It was the same feeling I used to get in the operations center when a mission went sideways, the moment when emotions become a liability and the brain switches to survival protocols. My heart rate, which had spiked for a second, slowed down to a rhythmic, heavy thud. The man who was supposed to be a groom died in that chair at 11:45 p.m. The operator took his place. My hands moved without trembling. I did not call her. I did not text her. I did not give her the courtesy of knowing that I knew. That would be a tactical error. It would give her time to prepare a defense, to delete evidence, to construct a new lie. I tapped the screen. Save to device. Upload to encrypted cloud drive alpha. Copy to external hard drive. I created redundancy. I secured the asset. I stared at the frozen thumbnail of the video, her red dress against his dark suit. The betrayal was absolute. It was a zero-day exploit that had destroyed the system entirely. There was no patching this. There was no recovering the data. The relationship was corrupted beyond repair. I leaned back in my chair, the darkness of the room pressing against my eyes. The penetration test on the bank's server was still running on the left monitor, blinking a steady cursor. Life was continuing, indifferent to the fact that my future had just been incinerated. I was no longer planning a wedding. I was planning a demolition. The front door unlocked at 10:15 inches the morning. The sound was sharp, metal scraping against metal, cutting through the silence I had been maintaining for 10 hours. I was sitting on the couch, drinking black coffee, wearing the face of a man who had slept well. It was a mask. I had not slept. I had been calibrating. She walked in, dropping her keys on the console table. She looked like the aftermath of a riot. Her hair was a tangled mess, her makeup smeared under her eyes, and she was carrying her high heels in her hand. She winced as her bare feet touched the hardwood floor. But it was the smell that hit me first. It was not just the stale odor of alcohol and cigarettes from a nightclub. It was a specific, musky cologne. It was expensive, Santal, 33 or something similar, woodsy and distinct. I do not wear cologne. I smell like unscented soap and laundry detergent. The scent clinging to her skin was a foreign contaminant. "Hey, babe," she croaked, her voice raspy. She dropped her bag and slumped against the wall. "God, I am dying. I think I am never drinking tequila again." I stood up and walked over to her. This was the first test of my new operational parameters. I had to look at the woman who had betrayed me and show her nothing but concern. "Rough night?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Brutal," she sighed, closing her eyes. "We danced until 3 in the morning. Then we all crashed at Jessica's place. My phone died halfway through the night. I am so sorry I did not text." The lie was smooth, delivered with the easy confidence of someone who believes they are immune to audit. "It is fine," I said. "You should hydrate. I will get you some aspirin." I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and retrieved 2 pills. My hands were steady. I handed them to her, and for a brief second, I looked at her neck. There was a faint red mark just below her ear, hastily covered with concealer that had worn off. A friction burn. Stubble rash. "Thanks, Ryan. You are the best," she said, swallowing the pills. She leaned in to kiss me. I turned my head slightly, letting her lips brush my cheek. I could not risk physical contact with a contamination source. "I am going to shower and sleep for a week." "Go ahead," I said. "I have some work to catch up on." As the bathroom door clicked shut and the shower started running, I did not feel relief. I felt focused. The emotional part of my brain was quarantined. The analytical part was now in command. I returned to my office and locked the door. It was time to begin the forensic audit. I pulled up the video file from the night before on my main monitor. I opened a second window for her shared Google Calendar and a third for our joint bank statement. In intelligence work, a single data point is just a dot. You need 3 points to triangulate a position. I had the dot. Now I needed the lines. I started with the video. I imported it into video editing software and slowed the playback speed to 25%. I muted the distorted bass of the club music. Silence is better for analysis. I watched the frame-by-frame movement. The kiss was the emotional evidence, but I needed the identity of the target. I zoomed in on the man. Charcoal suit, silver watch. But then, as he shifted his weight to pull her closer, his jacket lapel opened. Hanging from his belt was a corporate ID badge on a retractable lanyard. It was blurry, a smear of white and blue pixels. I applied a sharpening filter, enhancing the contrast. The logo became legible. It was the stylized A of the architecture firm where she worked. He was not a stranger at a bar. He was an insider, in fact, Dacker. I froze the frame on his face. I took a screenshot and ran a reverse image search through LinkedIn, filtering by her company's employee roster. The match came back in 3 seconds. Marcus Sterling, Senior Vice President of Operations. I opened his profile. He was 48 years old. He had a perfectly curated corporate smile, a degree from Yale, and a bio that talked about integrity and leadership. I scrolled down. He was married. There were posts about his 15th wedding anniversary, photos of him and his wife at charity galas. He had a reputation for mentoring young talent. My fiancée was his latest protégé. Target identified. Now I needed to establish the timeline. An affair of this comfort level does not happen overnight. I opened our joint credit card statement, the American Express, we use for household expenses and travel. I filtered the search parameters for the last 6 months. I looked for anomalies. In cybersecurity, we look for lateral movement, when a hacker gets into a system and moves sideways to access more data. I looked for her lateral movements. I found a charge for a boutique hotel in downtown Seattle on a Tuesday night 3 months ago. The descriptor on the statement was generic. Hospitality group. I cross-referenced the date with her calendar. On that Tuesday, her calendar read, late operational review with Marcus. I found another charge. An Uber Black ride at 2 a.m. on a Thursday, originating from a luxury condo building on the waterfront where Marcus Sterling lived and ending at our apartment. Her text message to me that night had said, Jessica is having a meltdown. staying at her place to comfort her. I pulled up her Venmo history. I could not see her private messages, but the transaction log is public unless you hide it. She had been sending consistent payments to Jessica, her best friend and maid of honor. The amounts were odd: $150, $200, $300. The captions were just emojis: a sushi roll, a cocktail glass, a shushing face. I cross-referenced the dates of the Venmo transfers, with nights she came home late. The pattern emerged with mathematical precision. She was not paying Jessica for sushi. She was paying Jessica for the alibi. She was transferring money to her friend to cover the costs of drinks or dinners so they would not appear on our joint cards, or perhaps paying a silence fee for using Jessica's name as a cover. I sat back, the cool light of the monitors washing over my face. The realization hit me with the weight of a physical blow, but I did not flinch. This was not a drunken mistake. This was a campaign. For 6 months, I had been sleeping next to a sleeper agent. Every time she said she was working late, she was with him. Every time she talked about how much she respected her mentor, she was laughing at me. And the worst part? I was subsidizing it. My salary paid the rent on this apartment where she slept off her hangovers. My credit score secured the lease. My stability allowed her to play the chaotic mistress to a bored executive. I looked at the file structure on my desktop. I created a new folder titled Project Sterling. Into this folder, I dragged the video. I dragged the screenshots of the hotel charges. I dragged the PDF of the Uber receipts. I dragged the LinkedIn profile of Marcus Sterling and the photos of his wife. I could have walked into the bedroom right then. I could have woken her up, screamed the truth, and thrown her out. It would have been satisfying for 5 minutes, but it would have been strategically unsound. It would have been emotional, messy, and legally reckless. No, I was not going to give her the dignity of a fight. I was going to give her the devastation of a verdict. I closed the folders. I encrypted the drive. I stood up and walked to the kitchen to pour another cup of coffee. The shower had stopped. I heard her humming a tune in the bedroom, oblivious to the fact that her life as she knew it had already ended. I was no longer her fiancé. I was the lead investigator in the case against her, and I was just getting started. If the video was the bullet, the financial records were the autopsy. I sat in the artificial twilight of my office, the hum of the hard drives the only sound in the apartment. The physical betrayal was a sharp, visceral pain, like a knife to the gut. But what I uncovered next was a dull, heavy ache, the crushing weight of systemic, calculated exploitation. Infidelity is one thing, financial parasitism is another. The first breaks your heart, the second attempts to break your future. I shifted my focus from the surveillance data to the financial architecture of our upcoming marriage. We were weeks away from the ceremony. We were in the process of closing on a lease for a new, larger apartment in a luxury high-rise downtown the skyline. She had insisted on it. She said we needed a fresh start, a space that reflected our combined potential. I pulled up the lease agreement PDF. It was awaiting my digital signature. The rent was astronomical, far more than her salary as a junior architect could support. That was where I came in. My credit score is immaculate, a hard-earned 820, built on years of military discipline and zero debt. She needed my credit history to bypass the building's rigorous income requirements. I looked at the lease start date, the 1st of next month. Then, I looked at the travel itinerary I had scraped from Marcus Sterling's hack schedule. Project lead, Sterling. Location, Seattle. Duration, 6 months. Housing, corporate stipend, Skyline Towers. I stopped breathing for a moment. The lease wasn't for us. The building wasn't a fresh start. It was his building. She was using my credit score and my income to secure a luxury apartment in the exact same complex where her lover would be staying on the company's dime. She wasn't building a home with me. She was building a convenient access tunnel to him. I was literally underwriting the logistics of her affair. The rage that flickered earlier had now solidified into a block of ice. I opened a new window and navigated to my email archives. I searched for prenup. My lawyer, a cynical man who had seen too many service members stripped bare by divorce, had drafted a prenuptial agreement 2 months ago. It was standard asset protection. When I presented it to her, she had cried. She had given a speech about how a prenup quantified love and made the marriage feel like a business transaction. She had looked at me with those wide, wet eyes and asked, Don't you trust me, Ryan? I had felt guilty. I had let the documents sit in a drawer, unsigned. Now, looking at the lease and the video, I realized it wasn't emotion. It was strategy. She stalled the signing to keep the timeline open. If we married without it, and she divorced me later, perhaps after her mentor left his wife, she would be entitled to half of my portfolio, half of my 401k, half of the cybersecurity consulting firm I was building. She wasn't just cheating, she was hedging her bets. I decided to follow the money all the way down. I accessed her bank statements, not the joint account, but her personal checking account. We had logged into it once on my iPad to pay a utility bill, and the password was still saved in the keychain. I bypassed the two-factor authentication because her phone, currently charging in the kitchen, was linked to my iPad via the cloud. I scrolled through the deposits. Her salary was standard, but every 2 weeks there was a deposit of $2,500 labeled Consulting Fees, Archer LLC. I ran a quick search on Archer LLC. It was a shell company registered in Delaware 3 months ago. The registered agent? The same law firm that represented her company. It was a slush fund. Marcus Sterling was funneling company money to her, disguised as consulting work to supplement her lifestyle. And where did that money go? I tracked the outflows. Not to savings, not to our wedding fund. Net-a-Porter, the real. Saks, Fifth Avenue. But I had never seen these packages at our apartment. I checked the shipping addresses on the transaction receipts. They weren't coming here. They were going to a private mailroom box 3 blocks from her office. I sat back, the realization washing over me like cold water. She had a shadow life. She had a shadow apartment lined up, a shadow income, and a shadow wardrobe. And I was the front. I was the clean skin. In intelligence operations, a clean skin is an operative with no record, no history, someone who looks completely normal to the outside world. I was her cover. I provided the respectable fiancé title, the stable home, the heavy lifting of real life, while she lived out a high-stakes fantasy with her boss. I was her safety net. If Marcus got bored and dumped her, she still had me. If Marcus got caught and fired, she still had my salary. I was not a partner. I was an insurance policy against her own bad decisions. That realization was the final severance of the emotional tether. The man who loved her, the man who thought about her smile and her laugh was gone. He had been decommissioned. In his place sat the mission planner. I looked at the clock. It was 1 p.m. She was still asleep, recovering from her night of freedom. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer. It was Sunday, but I pay him enough to answer. "Ryan," he answered, sounding surprised. "Everything okay?" "No," I said, my voice flat and devoid of inflection. "Do not file the marriage license. Do not finalize the trust transfer we discussed." "What is going on?" "The operational environment has changed," I said. "I need you to prepare a full asset protection protocol. I am moving the liquid cash from the joint savings into a segregated holding account within the hour. I want to know my exposure if I cancel the venue 48 hours out." "Ryan, talk to me. Did she call it off?" "No," I said, looking at the video freeze frame of her kissing Marcus Sterling. "She thinks everything is proceeding according to plan. She is walking into a kill box." "I see," my lawyer said, his tone shifting instantly to professional sharpness. "I will have the paperwork ready by tomorrow morning." I hung up. I logged into our banking portal. With 3 clicks, I transferred $45,000, the money I had saved for the down payment on a house, the money she was going to use for his apartment, out of the joint account and into a high-yield savings account solely in my name. I watched the balance drop to 0. I felt nothing. No guilt, no hesitation. It was just resource reallocation. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Marcus Sterling was probably having brunch with his wife, thinking he was untouchable. He thought he was playing a game with a young, naive girl who had a clueless fiancé. He was wrong. He wasn't playing a game. He had just initiated a hostile takeover of the wrong asset. And now, I was going to liquidate his entire portfolio. The venue was a private dining room at a steakhouse in downtown Seattle, the kind of place where the lighting is intentionally dim to obscure the prices on the menu. The air smelled of aged beef, expensive red wine, and performative happiness. 25 people were gathered around a long mahogany table. My parents, her parents, the bridal party, and a few select VIPs. At the head of the table sat Marcus Sterling. He had arrived 20 minutes late, his wife, Elena, on his arm. He wore the easy confidence of a man who believes he owns every room he enters. He clapped me on the shoulder when he walked in, gripping my hand with a firm, practiced shake. "Big day coming up, Ryan. Proud of you," he had said. It was a master class in compartmentalization. He was shaking the hand of the man whose future he was actively dismantling. I watched him take his seat. I watched my fiancée, radiant in a white cocktail dress, laugh at his jokes. The atmosphere was festive. To the untrained eye, this was a celebration of love. To me, it was a target-rich environment. Earlier that afternoon, at 1,400 hours, a courier had delivered a sealed padded envelope to the Sterling residence. It was addressed to Elena Sterling, marked personal and confidential. Inside was a single USB drive and a handwritten note. "Play this somewhere safe. You deserve to know the truth." I calculated the probability that she had watched it yet as low. She looked calm, perhaps a little bored, politely cutting her steak. The package was a delayed fuse, designed to detonate after the main event, ensuring there would be no safe harbor for Marcus when he returned home. But the primary objective was here, in this room. My fiancée stood up to give her speech. She tapped her champagne flute with a silver fork, the sharp ting-ting-ting cutting through the chatter. The room hushed. "I just want to thank everyone for being here," she began, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. She looked at me, her eyes glistening. "Ryan, you are my rock. You are the most loyal, steady man I have ever known. I cannot wait to build a life with you. I cannot wait to grow old with you." The room murmured with approval. Her mother wiped a tear. Marcus nodded approvingly, sipping his Cabernet. It was a perfect performance. She almost believed it herself. That is the danger of a skilled narcissist. They rewrite reality in real time to suit their narrative. "Thank you, babe," I said. My voice was flat. "I have prepared a little something as well. A tribute to our journey." I stood up. I buttoned my suit jacket. I picked up my laptop, which was resting under my chair, and walked to the small AV station set up in the corner of the room. The projector hummed to life, casting a harsh rectangular light onto the white screen behind the table. "Most couples show photos of their first dates," I said, addressing the room but looking directly at Marcus. "But I wanted to show you the reality of our last 6 months, because transparency is the foundation of marriage, is it not?" I connected the HDMI cable. The screen flickered blue, then settled on a black background. "Volume up," I said softly. I pressed the spacebar. The video did not start with music. It started with a timestamp. October 14th, 23:42 hours. The audio from the nightclub footage roared through the high-quality restaurant speakers. The bass was heavy, ominous. On screen, the shaky cell phone footage stabilized. The image was grainy but unmistakable. My fiancée, in the red dress, grinding against Marcus Sterling. The zoom feature I had applied in post-production kicked in, framing their faces. A gasp rippled through the room. It was not a scream, but a sharp intake of breath, like the air had been sucked out of the space. Then, the audio cut to my voiceover. I had recorded it in my studio, stripping it of all emotion. It sounded like a crash investigation report. Subject 1, the bride. Subject 2, Marcus Sterling, Senior Vice President. The video cut to a split screen. On the left, the invoice from the luxury hotel. On the right, the text message she sent me at the exact same time. "So tired, going to sleep early. Love you." Discrepancy detected. My voiceover stated, "Financial trace indicates corporate funds used for personal leisure." I looked at the table. The reaction was physiological. My fiancée had frozen. Her hand was covering her mouth, her eyes wide with terror, fixed on the screen. She looked like a deer in the headlights of a semi-truck. Marcus was trying to stand up, but his legs seemed to have failed him. He knocked over his wine glass. The red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like a bloodstain. "Turn it off," he sputtered. His voice cracked. "Ryan, what the hell is this? Turn it off." I did not turn it off. I let it run. The screen shifted to the chat logs. I had highlighted the specific messages where they mocked me. Him. "Does the soldier boy suspect anything?" Her. He is clueless. He is just happy to pay the bills. I need his credit for the lease, then we are set. The silence in the room was now absolute, heavier than any silence I had ever experienced in the field. It was the silence of total social annihilation. Elena Sterling, Marcus's wife, stood up slowly. She did not look at the screen. She looked at her husband. Her face was not angry. It was shattered. It was the look of a woman watching 20 years of life dissolve into ash in 60 seconds. "Marcus," she whispered. The sound was devastating. My fiancée finally found her voice. "Ryan, please. It is not what it looks like. Please stop." She reached out toward me. Desperate, hysterical. I closed the laptop lid. The screen went black. The sudden darkness was disorienting. I stood there, standing at attention, my posture perfect. I looked at her parents, who were staring at their daughter with a mixture of horror and shame. I looked at my parents, who looked ready to kill someone. Then I looked at her. "The wedding is canceled," I said. My voice carried clearly to every corner of the room. "I have terminated the lease. I have separated our finances. I will not be legally binding myself to a fraud." I turned to Marcus, who was now pale, sweating, wiping wine off his lap with a trembling napkin. "Your wife has the full unedited files on a drive at your house, Marcus," I said. "And the internal audit team at your company will receive the forensic accounting report at 0900 hours tomorrow morning." I disconnected the HDMI cable. I coiled it neatly and placed it on the table. I am done here. I did not wait for a response. I did not wait for the tears, the screaming, or the inevitable chaotic implosion that was about to occur. I turned on my heel and walked toward the exit. As I pushed through the heavy double doors of the restaurant, I heard the first sob break out behind me. It was a guttural, ugly sound, but it was fading. I walked out into the cool Seattle night air. I adjusted my cuffs. My heart rate was 65 beats per minute. The operation was successful. The target was neutralized. Now, the cleanup began. The rehearsal dinner was a tactical strike, loud, visible, and designed to disrupt the immediate command and control structure of their relationship. But in warfare, you do not just disrupt the enemy's communications. You dismantle their supply lines. You cut off their resources until they starve. While the emotional debris of the dinner was still settling over the weekend, the real operation initiated on Monday morning at 0900 hours. This was the professional kill chain. My revenge was not just personal, it was regulatory. Weeks prior, while they were busy sneaking into hotels, I had been compiling a dossier. I treated Marcus Sterling not as a rival male, but as a malicious insider threat. I utilized my background in corporate compliance and forensic data analysis to build a report that would look at home on an FBI desk. The document, titled Internal Audit Referral Sterling V4 PDF, was 60 pages of cold, hard facts. I did not focus on the sex. Corporate America tolerates infidelity if the numbers are good. What corporate America does not tolerate is the misappropriation of assets and the violation of fiduciary duty. I had tracked the consulting fees paid to the shell company connected to my ex-fiancée. I had flagged the client development dinners that were actually dates. I had itemized the travel expenses for site inspections that were merely weekend getaways. Under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act and internal corporate governance policies, Marcus had not just cheated on his wife, he had embezzled shareholder money to fund his libido. I executed the distribution protocol. I did not send the email from my personal account. I used a secure, anonymous whistleblower portal, routed through 3 VPNs to ensure untraceability. Recipient 1, the chairman of the audit committee. The board of directors fears liability more than anything. Recipient 2, the external auditors. By sending it to the third-party firm responsible for the company's financial integrity, I ensured the internal team could not bury it. They were legally obligated to investigate. Recipient 3, the CEO of their biggest competitor. This was the chaos variable. I knew the competitor was looking for leverage in a hostile merger. I handed them the ammunition to drive the stock price down. I sat in my home office, sipping black coffee, watching the read receipts trigger on my tracking software. Opened. 9:04 a.m. Location, New York HQ. Opened. 9:12 a.m. Location, Compliance Office, Seattle. The fallout was not immediate, but it was inevitable. Like a virus spreading through a network, The data moved from inboxes to meeting rooms to legal counsel. By Tuesday, the investigation was active. I knew this because my ex-fiance's LinkedIn status flickered. She removed her current employer from her headline. Through my network, the quiet brotherhood of IT admins and security specialists, I received the sit rep from inside the building. On Wednesday morning, Marcus Sterling arrived at the office. He swiped his badge at the turnstile. The light did not turn green. It flashed red. Access denied. He tried again. Red. 2 security officers, men he likely ignored every day for 10 years, approached him. They did not smile. They did not call him Mr. Sterling. They escorted him to a side room. He was not allowed to clear out his desk. He was not allowed to say goodbye to his team. He was handed a suspension notice pending a forensic investigation into financial irregularities. The king of the office was escorted out of the building holding nothing but his car keys, while the junior staff watched from the glass lobby. The humiliation was absolute. Simultaneously, the legal front opened fire. Elena Sterling was not a woman to be trifled with. She had taken the USB drive I sent her directly to a shark of a divorce attorney. With the evidence of infidelity and financial dissipation, spending marital assets on a mistress, she filed for an immediate freeze on their joint accounts. Marcus was locked out of his office and locked out of his bank accounts. His reputation, carefully constructed over 20 years of handshakes and keynote speeches, evaporated in 48 hours. The industry is small. The rumors traveled faster than fiber optics. He wasn't just the guy who cheated. He was the executive who stole from the company to pay for it. He was radioactive. And then there was the collateral damage. My ex-fiancée. I did not hate her anymore. Hate requires energy. I felt only a cold, distant pity. She had bet everything on a man she thought was a king, only to find out he was just another employee subject to termination. She was summoned to HR. There were no severance packages for her. There were no golden parachutes. She was a junior employee implicated in an executive's embezzlement scheme. Even if she wasn't criminally charged, her career in that city was over. She was the other woman who brought down the firm's star player. The social isolation was immediate. The friends who had cheered for her freedom at the club distanced themselves, terrified of being associated with the scandal. She called me on Thursday night. It was the first time I had answered since the rehearsal dinner. "Ryan," she sobbed. She sounded broken, small. "They fired me. They took my laptop. I have nothing. Marcus won't answer my calls." "I know," I said. My voice was devoid of malice, stripping the conversation of any emotional handhold she could grab onto. "How could you do this?" she asked. "You destroyed everything." "I did not destroy anything," I replied, looking at the screens in my command center. "I simply audited the books. You two created the deficit. I just published the report. I have nowhere to go," she whispered. "The lease on the new apartment. I can't afford it alone. I can't afford the penalty to break it." "That sounds like a logistics problem," I said. "I am no longer your logistics officer." I hung up. I looked at the news feed on my monitor. A small article in the financial section noted that the vice president of her firm had stepped down for personal reasons amid an internal review. The stock had dipped 2%. The mission was accomplished. The threat was neutralized. The enemy combatants were in full retreat, their resources depleted, and their alliances shattered. I turned off the monitors. The room plunged into darkness. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. The silence in the apartment was different now. Before, it was the heavy, static-filled silence of unsaid words and hidden secrets. Now, it was the clean, hollow echo of a decommissioned site. The boxes were stacked in the hallway, labeled with the precision of a logistics officer. Kitchen, library, archive. I wasn't fleeing. I was executing a strategic withdrawal. It was 0600 hours on a rainy Seattle Tuesday. The gray light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the dust outlines where furniture used to sit. I stood in the center of the living room, holding my keys. I checked the perimeter one last time. No loose ends, no forgotten assets. I had swept the space, not just of my belongings, but of my presence. When the landlord walked in later that morning to reclaim the unit, there would be no trace that Ryan Cooper had ever lived here, or that he had almost married a woman who didn't exist. I walked to the kitchen counter and placed the key fob on the granite. It made a final, decisive click. Leaving was not emotional, it was procedural. I took the elevator down to the garage, loaded the last box into my truck, and drove out into the mist. I did not look back at the building. In my rearview mirror, it was just structure and glass, shrinking until it disappeared into the traffic of I-5. The legal separation was surgical. My lawyer, a man who appreciated brevity, had the papers ready. Since we weren't married, there was no divorce decree, but there was the matter of disentangling the joint liabilities. I signed the documents removing my name from the utility accounts, the insurance policies, and the joint credit lines. With every signature, I felt a physical weight lifting off my chest, the weight of carrying another person's instability. "You handled this well, Ryan," my lawyer said, capping his pen. "Most guys in your position, they want to burn the house down. You just remove the oxygen." "Fire requires fuel," I said, standing up. "I just cut the supply line." But the phone in my pocket told a different story. The fuel was trying desperately to reignite. For weeks, my phone had been vibrating with a barrage of texts from her. I didn't block her. That would be a loss of intelligence. I monitored the feed. Her messages followed the classic Kubler-Ross grief cycle, accelerated by panic. First came the denial. "Ryan, we can fix this. Please just talk to me." Then the anger. "You ruined my life. You're a sociopath. You planned this whole thing just to humiliate me." Then the bargaining. "I'll sign a post-nup. I'll quit my job. I'll do anything." And finally the depression. "I'm so alone. I miss who we were." I read them like intercepted enemy chatter. I analyzed the syntax, the timing, the emotional manipulation. But I did not engage. To respond is to validate. To respond is to give the target a coordinate to aim at. I remained a ghost. I archived the threads to the encrypted drive evidence, just in case she ever tried to litigate and let the silence be my only reply. However, I would be lying if I said there was no cost. You don't walk away from a 3-year deployment without scars. The nights were the hardest. I moved into a smaller industrial loft in a quiet part of the city. For the first month, insomnia was my primary companion. I would wake up at 0300, my heart hammering, scanning the room for threats that weren't there. It was a form of emotional hypervigilance. I had trusted a hostile agent. I had allowed my perimeter to be breached because I wanted the fantasy. I sat up on those nights, staring at the city lights, and forced myself to conduct a brutal after-action review. I admitted my own failures. I had seen the red flags early, on the need for validation, the small lies, the financial opacity. I had ignored them because I was tired of the war. I wanted the peace of a white picket fence so badly that I didn't check to see if the fence was painted over rot. That was on me. I had violated my own doctrine. Trust, but verify. I had trusted, and I had looked away. But pain, if processed correctly, is data. It is a lesson in system hardening. Slowly the insomnia faded. The discipline returned. I threw myself back into my work. I wasn't just maintaining firewalls anymore. I was building new architectures. I took on a contract with a defense firm, designing counter-intrusion protocols. The work was demanding, logical, and binary. It made sense in a way human relationships didn't. Code either works or it breaks. There is no nuance, no betrayal, no hidden agenda in C++. I started running again. 5 miles every morning, rain or shine. The physical exertion burned off the residual anger. I ate clean. I slept in a room that was mine, bought with my money, secured by my own strength. 6 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop, working on a laptop. I looked up and saw a couple fighting at a nearby table. The woman was crying. The man looked guilty. A year ago, I would have felt sympathy. Now I just analyzed the dynamic, noted the likely outcome, and returned to my screen. I was different. Colder perhaps, harder, certainly. But I was whole. I realized then that the revenge wasn't about the rehearsal dinner. It wasn't about getting Marcus fired or getting her evicted. Those were just tactical necessities. The real revenge was this moment right here. It was the ability to sit alone, drinking my coffee, knowing that my bank account was secure, my conscience was clear, and my future was entirely under my command. I had believed in her promises once. I had believed in the forever. But when the promise broke, I didn't break with it. I fell back on my training. I relied on the protocol. She and Marcus had tried to write a tragedy for me. A story where I was the victim, the clueless fiancé, left holding the bill. They wanted to make me a footnote in their twisted romance. But I refused to play that role. I closed my laptop, the aluminum shell clicking shut with a satisfying sound. I looked out the window at the rain washing the streets clean. I didn't let them write my ending. I wrote it myself, and as I walked out into the cool, fresh air, I knew the operation was finally, successfully, complete. Revenge might feel like justice, but the real victory is the peace you find afterwards. I didn't write this ending to hurt her. I wrote it to reclaim the narrative of my life. No matter how deep the betrayal, you always have the power to disconnect, regroup, and start a new mission on your own terms. Never let fear keep you in a place where you aren't respected. I'm curious, have you ever had to choose between love and your own self-respect? Let me know your story in the comments and tell me which province you are tuning in from. If you believe in truth and karma, hit that like button and subscribe to the Secret Lovers channel. The operation continues in the next video, right here.